listener production.
The creators of this podcast would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which it is recorded. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are the first storytellers of this land. We pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, as well as any Indigenous people who may be listening today.
Hello and welcome to Two Guys, One Urn, a cricket-adjacent podcast. My name is Will Anderson, and joining me on this podcast is a man you might know from the TOFOP podcasting network. You might know from the AFL-adjacent podcast, Two Guys, One Cup. It is none other than a man who hasn't watched cricket for 20 years.
25.
Has jumped back on board. It's Charlie Clausen. Hello, Charlie.
Hi, Will. Thanks for having me. I mean, this is bizarre. I am a guest on your brand new podcast, but I technically am hosting this session.
It's true, because I don't know how to do that.
My podcasting studio to record.
I'm like a podcasting vampire. I need to be invited in. But we were doing our other AFL-adjacent podcast earlier this morning, Two Guys, One Cup. So we've just finished that. We've had a 15-minute break, and now we're rolling into this episode of Two Guys, One Urn. So we've decided to keep it in-house.
I'm very excited. Like, as you mentioned, I had not watched cricket since the mid-90s. And to give you a bit of background, like as a kid, cricket was my sport. I loved cricket. That's the one I played the most. Alan Border was my hero. I had posters of the Australian team up on my wall.
Now, just as you mentioned Alan Border, we should say, of course, a big shout out to AB, who revealed over the weekend that he's suffering with Parkinson's disease, and his doctor has said he probably won't make it to 80. But one of the great sports people of all time, Alan Border, in our country. And yeah, kids of our generation, Mark Howard, who was on the first podcast of this, and I remember the two of us going down to Melbourne to watch his 100th test match together, and he was just
Mr.
an absolute
Reliable,
hero of ours.
Pugsley.
So, yeah. Well, he was pretty much that guy. We were shit, except for Alan Border. And Alan Border would do whatever it took for us to win. Like, he was kind of cricket's equivalent of like an AFL gritty midfielder. You know, he just was like, he wasn't the most skilled, player in the entire world, although he had great skill. He just had grit.
He's the guy you'll point when you need a bit of stability. You know what I mean? Like, can talk to all corners. So then it's pretty much when Australia got good at cricket, like when they became sort of the best team in the world. I don't know if it's because, I'm a St Kilda fan. I just don't know how to deal with being in a dysfunctional relationship. I don't know what love feels like. No, I think it was actually more that St Kilda got good too, and that took more of my attention through the 90s. And then I just sort of lost touch with it. And then it's kind of like, it's like anything, you sort of miss a series, like a TV series, you miss one season. It's like, who are these people? I don't know. And then it all felt scary and weird. I mean, of course I knew peripherally about people like Shane Warne and Ricky Ponting, and I would know enough to be able to carry a conversation. But, like a month ago whenever you first asked me to come on this show, you started throwing out names at me, and I'm like, I have no idea who that person is, or if they bowl or they bat or whatever. But that's a long way of saying I have been obsessed with the Ashes. Like, I wasn't even going to watch it. I thought it'd be funny just to come on the show and just be like, oh, I'm an idiot. No, what's a cricket ball? And all this kind of stuff.
I thought that was what we were going to go with as well. And I was like, that'll be fun. But instead, the reason that I started doing this series was honestly because with the World Test Championship and then this series, this Ashes, I thought there was real potential. And look, if you want to look at the really dark side of it, which is Test match cricket is potentially on its last legs. It is not very economical to play for the lower teams that play cricket, and really there's only sort of a handful of top teams that still play it. It is a very anachronistic, quirky form of the game that I would love to survive, but it needs fierce, interesting competitions for it to survive, and I had a real feeling that this Ashes series was going to be that. And so far, that has proven to be 100%
it is,
the case.
Adam Zwar, who's been a friend of the TOFOP network and a huge cricket fan himself, he said it best. During the first test, I was messaging him saying, oh my God, like this is – because I was catching up on everything. What's Bazball? What's this? The history between the two teams. And he was like, it's absorbing. And I'm like, it is absorbing. And the thing about Test cricket that I'd forgotten, like, you know, for most Australians, whether you're into cricket or not, the sound of Test cricket is the sound of summer because it's always on. You know, like you float in and out of the room where the TV is, you make dinner and stuff, and the cricket's always on. And I'd forgotten how kind of ubiquitous it is just to have the cricket on. And so every night, you know, around 8 p.m., I just put the cricket on and I do other work, and it's great because you can focus on other things. I got a lot done. And every time I heard like a wicket or something, I'd look up and I'd get all excited and stuff. Or once my work was done, it's like, okay, well, I'll watch till, you know, Smith gets his 100, or I'll just watch till the next wicket. And before you know it, it's fucking 1 a.m. and it's like, I can't go to bed because I've invested this much now. I need to know how this story ends. So I watched the first test, got as much information as I could, but I did write down some notes, which I thought I could ask you on, because I have some questions, okay?
This is great.
Because it feels to me, right?
Just before we jump into your questions, Ramona's barking to get on the couch, so I'm going to put her up on the couch. Okay, so you've got some questions, Charlie.
So I feel like a dude who went into a coma around 1995, and I've woken up and it's the year 2023. And so things are familiar, but there's just the little differences that are just sort of throwing me off.
And the nuances as well, because this is the thing about Test match cricket that I struggle to sometimes talk to people about, because some people look at Test match cricket as if it is just a game or a sport, but because it is played over 5 days, and you know this series is obviously played over 5 Test matches as well, and this is the way that it's played out so far, is that it is a story, and you need to know 100%. The story and the context to then understand what is happening on the field.
That's exactly it, and that's the. I mean, when I was thinking about like why am I so drawn in, it is because of the narrative, and they are so skilled. The broadcasters and, you know, Cricket Australia and all the kind of apps that I've subscribed to that now feed me information in filling in the blanks. And, you know, they're talking about, this is Edgbaston all over again. And I'm like, what does that mean? And then, you know, like there's all these like threads I have to follow. Like the initial one was Bazball, because that's all I was hearing in the first test was Bazball. Yes. Bazball's back, baby.
So what did you initially think that Bazball was?
I had no idea what it was.
I mean, you were hearing the term because everybody's saying Bazball, but did you have any sense of what that actually meant?
No, I don't, because I can't remember. I think I got on the no pun intended. I think I got on the front foot quite early with Bazball and texted Alex Williams, I think, and was because he's a big cricket fan as well, obviously, and was like, "What's Bazball?" And so he sent me a fairly succinct summary, which is that they got a new coach in Kiwi, I believe it was.
Brendan McCullum, who was a wicketkeeper and attacking batsman for Brendan Barry McCullum, I believe, which is where the Baz comes from in Bazball. Right. And he was a great attacking player and has taken that into his coaching, obviously. So that's but it will be very important when we have a discussion later in this podcast about a specific thing that defined this second test to remember that Brendan McCullum was a wicketkeeper. We'll get back to that for apparent reason, guys.
Foreshadowing, yeah. So my understanding of Bazball is like it's a very aggressive, play your natural game, go for your shots, like don't be conservative. And that's the other brilliant thing that I'd forgotten about Test cricket is it's a story, but there's also like so much psychology that goes into what bowlers you bring on when, you know, how you set your field. Are you going to entice a batsman to go for a big shot? Are you going to get them to go conservative? Are you going to slow their run rate? Like there's all this amazing kind of nuances that it makes sense you have to play it over 5 days because this shit wouldn't play out in like a 1 day or like even the length of a football game. Like this stuff takes time to seed.
Well, and also time for a plan. Yeah. Like this is so often you can have a 2 or 3 day plan. It might be to tire out, you know, one of the opposition in some way or to like, you know, you're working on multiple plans at multiple times over these days. Like the best description I ever heard of cricket, Test match cricket is that it's physical chess. And it's definitely been played out this series as you see one side like attack or advance in one way, and you see the opposition not necessarily defend or re-attack in the same way, that they take that on board and then do something else, and then the opposition has to adapt to what they've done in response. And we've already seen that flow through 2 test matches. The fact that we've still got 3 up our sleeve is incredible to me, because what the fuck is going to happen next? So this is good. You've got a good sense of...
So my understanding is that so England have been very successful as exponents of Bazball, just really like shaken up. They're the sexy new bad boys on the Test cricket scene. They're the Andre Agassi's hitting the court and the black Nikes and whatever. And so Australia plays quite a...
The bucket hats are their version of their black Nikes. These ridiculous fucking Gilligan's Island style bucket hats. I mean, you like it because
it's like
they look like something someone would wear to fucking
dance party in Manchester.
Like a 24-hour rave, like off their head on fucking pills, $2 pingers and a bucket hat, just like.
And then my understanding is Australia plays quite a traditional kind of like. We're not like just go all out attack. We like to play a mix of like defense and attack. And
I mean, essentially what's so exciting about this series, because there might be people listening to this as the first episode, people who've come in because they listen to our other podcasts.
Finally, this is what I've been waiting for. Charlie Mill talking about cricket.
And I welcome to those people, but the reason that this series is set up as being so exciting was basically, for people who don't know, what happened was there was a match called the World Test Championship, which was between the 2 best performed teams over the last 24 months. So the best 2 performed teams over the last 24 months were Australia and India. Australia won that, right? Then they were playing the best. England are the best performed team over the last 12 months. So they've been playing. They were hopeless before they adopted this new style. So
same team, like more or less the same team?
More or less the same team. A couple of people picked because of their capacity to play attacking, but essentially, with slight modifications, the same team, but playing this new style. So basically it was going to be this test of Australia are consistently from top to bottom probably the best team in world cricket, and England have this new style of playing that might be essentially they were a disruptor, and so it's this idea of, is it the method that is most important or the balance of your team and your capacity to adapt in these situations, but also the fact that this was a face-off situation. Because in the history of Test match cricket, if Australia are playing England, the team that is playing the attacking reckless cricket has always traditionally been Australia, and the team that plays a more traditional form of Test match cricket has been England. And so this is
that's a good reboot or sequel where you just subvert the understood tropes. And it's like, okay, well, in this sequel, we're going to make the good guys the bad guys and bad guys the good guys. I love it. And there was a real sense of that. That's the other thing I picked up from the games, is that I feel like, when I watched cricket, Australia was coming out of that sort of period of being kind of mediocre, is we were always the underdogs. But I got the sense that we were the establishment, that we're supporting kind of like the old guard, and that England is the one who are up against it and taking they're the rebel alliance and we're the empire. That's the feeling I got.
Well, particularly when it comes to the future of Test match cricket, because for the future of Test match cricket, I mean, I do think that there's got to be more attacking, more adventurous Test match cricket played. So there needs to be some success to it otherwise, because if people keep playing, like Australians are great at playing Test match cricket.
5 days in a draw, is that what you're saying? That people, it's a real turn-off?
Yeah, people don't particularly get into that for some reason. I don't know why. That I can't understand.
I mean, let me just say that like Gemma, who's not particularly into sports at all. And, it was a real kind of, we've been together 20 years. Like AFL was like a real kind of like, that's of all the things we've achieved in our relationship, including, having a child, me getting her to like, let me watch football has probably been my greatest, proudest achievement. Yeah. But she started watching me watch the cricket and she was like, what the fuck is this shit? Like, what? We haven't done this the whole time we've been here. It's like finding out Is it like a dirty secret about your partner? It's like
secret
oh my
drinking
God,
or something.
you're a go-go dancer on the weekends? How long has this been going on?
She's just found a bottle of vodka floating in the cistern of the toilet.
That's right. And she's like, you're a cricket guy? You're not a cricket. And I said, well, I didn't think I was, but this is like a particular. And then I started taking through Baz ball and she walked off. So it's like she was having none of it. But as I said, I feel like I've woken up from a coma because there's things that I remember about Test cricket or cricket in general that have just changed slightly. So I just want to take you through.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's right. You take me through your notes and then we'll get to the actual game that was played.
So score review. When did that come in?
Oh, that's been in for a while. Okay. So much like technology, it was in – so I don't know if you've heard in the footy, Charlie, when occasionally there's a point and they'll say what happened on Snicko. You know how snicking isn't a thing in AFL football, but it is in cricket? That's where that technology comes from. That's why it's called Snicko, because it was to detect snicks
on the bat.
Of the bat in the cricket. So I think originally they had Israeli military technology was when it was first introduced, I'm pretty sure. And so they've been able to there's been third umpires in the game for quite a considerable
and so how
time
many
now.
How many do you get of those?
I believe, now this I actually might be getting this wrong, but I believe you get 2 reviews, but each innings from each side. So but if the review –
okay.
So you have to do the T sign to do a review. Obviously, you have to do it
5 in a match then?
Each side – so hang on. No, so each side are getting 2 per innings, I believe, not per session, per innings. But however – if you get the review right, you retain a review. So, like if you're right, like if you you don't lose a review. And if it's umpire's call, you don't lose your review. So sometimes it'll be like, it's too close, and so they go with the umpire's call. Yeah. You don't lose your review for that. You only lose your review if it is like clearly a bad review.
I feel like, waking up from the coma, that it has reduce the role of an umpire to a less dignified status because they were revered. It's essentially when we were kids, before the third umpire, just their decision was final and you just had to take it. And I just assumed that they were smarter and more perceptive than we were, but it turns out they get it all wrong a fucking lot of the time. Like that 3D LBW thing that they do, I'm like, oh, that's taken the bit of the fun out of it. Like I used to love an LBW decision because I didn't quite understand what LBW was. And now it's like, it's kind of a bit like the Star Wars prequels. You've explained too much. Now there's no magic.
Right, yeah. I do agree with you to a certain extent because weirdly enough, as technology always does, it actually sometimes introduces more of an element of doubt. Like there's been things that have gone to the third umpire that haven't really cleared it up anymore. It's just become another thing that people can argue about, and a couple of them happened during this test match. So, okay, so that's been around for a while. You're able to go for your reviews. If you get the review right, you retain your review. If it's umpire's call, you retain your review. If it's wrong though, lose your review. And Australia had notoriously been pretty bad at that for a while. So one thing that Patrick Cummins was not good at was we would get to positions in games where he believes his players too much, right?
He's like a parent who's just a little too permissive with his kids.
And do you really think that's out? And the bowler's like, it's out. It's definitely out. Review it. And he's like, all right, well, I trust you. And then it wasn't out. It was nowhere near being out. And so
there was no ball. Didn't even leave his hand.
So now they've got a little committee, the Australians, that have a chat together. So that
the Iddy Biddy Hitty committee.
That's the...
I don't know. I said that. I'm sorry.
I mean, it's just hard to hear committee without thinking about Itty Bitty Titty Committee. But the Itty Bitty Titty Committee get together.
Itty Bitty Hitty Committee, they can be.
Oh, yeah. They form the Itty Bitty Hitty Committee.
Yeah. They will get the ball hit the bat.
The Itty Bitty Ditty Hitty Committee.
Itty Bitty Ditty Hitty Committee.
So
I think we should just end the episode there. We're not getting better than that. No more laughs getting bigger than
the members of the Itty Biddy Diddy Hitty committee get together, and it's Pat Cummins, it is Steve Smith, and it is Alex Carey. And so they all have a bit of a chat and decide whether they trust the bowler or not in that situation.
Okay. I want to ask you about the players in a sec, but there's just one more thing I want to get to, the coma thing. Because when I was a kid, the stumps were mic'd up and you could hear, my memory is like the most you'd hear is bowled Shane from Ian Healy, bowled Shane. Like that's what we said. That was the equivalent of Kappa in my playground. In cricket, it was bowled Shane. In winter, it was Kappa. Now the mics are so good, you hear in whole bloody conversations. Like there's a few times I was going back to go, oh, this is fascinating. Like they're having a bit of a chat. Carey sort of gently ribbing the batsman. Oh, like Stokes and Pat Cummins have a bit to say to each other. Like there's all this kind of.
So it turns out by the end it had got beyond gentle ribbing, but we'll get
we'll get back
it was no longer ribbed for your pleasure.
Some very angry members at Lords, it seems like. So that is, and then the other thing is what happened to who's our bat sponsor now? New Balance. Do they make cricket bats now? Is that?
So yeah. Look, you're right. The days of everybody having like
Gray Nichols,
they're done. There's new. I mean, that is an interesting.
Gray Nichols, I noticed, but Australia's all.
There still exists Gray Nichols, but there is a wider range of bat sponsors. I'm very interested in that. Do New Balance make a cricket bat, or do New Balance just sponsor Steve Smith's cricket bat?
And is it a generic cricket bat? Like, surely your cricket bat would be like, it's essential that you have the highest quality cricket bat. You can't just, go to a sweatshop and get a stack of cheapies and like a New Balance sticker on.
No, New Balance are definitely okay. In fact, if you want to buy yourself a New Balance cricket bat, TC Player Edition English Willow cricket bat, what do you think that would go for?
Oh,
if you had to buy yourself,
I was in a coma for 30 years.
I know.
What's inflation done?
I wouldn't have known either. So, what do you think it would cost you to buy one of these?
$300.
Yeah, So, a lot higher than that is the answer to your question. Right. That's the kind of where I would have started as well, but it turns out it's a lot higher than that.
$1,200.
Higher than that.
Oh, 2,000.
$1,700 Australian.
A lot. So Iona was showing a bit of interest in cricket. Not anymore. I'm going to dissuade her from that.
You can get. There's definitely a lot of cheaper options than that. That seems to be your top of the line.
That was one of the other things I wanted to mention about like getting into cricket again. So there was the Ashes, obviously, and the World Championship, but also you probably heard there was an episode of Bluey to round out the fourth season or the third season, which was called Cricket, and it's all about why cricket is such a beautiful, important game. And it's all those things we've mentioned about like the storylines and the psychology wrapped up in this beautiful little kid's story. And Iona watched that episode and was so kind of taken with it. She's like, I want to play cricket. And there's a beautiful moment where it's all about this little kid, this little dog who's a great batsman. And then it ends where he walks off the park and it sort of morphs and now he's playing for Australia. And it's a really kind of like emotional moment. It's like, oh God, Bluey's got me back into cricket. This show's amazing.
Well, speaking of cricket, and if Iona did have any genuine interest in it, I'm sure Gemma would nip that in the bud as quickly as possible. Yeah. But the Australian women are currently playing the Ashes as well in England, and it should give a shout out to our all-conquering Australian women's cricket team who are just amazing at cricket. And so the way their Ashes works is it's a point system. So they have like one test match and then I think there's like 3 T20s and like a one day or two, and there's different points for different. But the Aussies have won the first 2 of those already, the test and the first T20, and they are such a good cricket team, the Australian women's cricket team too.
Well, if Iona has any of my athletic genetics, then she's not making the Australian women's cricket team. That is for certain. Okay, so quickly before we get into the game, just one last thing I want to ask you is, cricket's all about personalities, right?
Yes, players.
And so
that's what we're
players.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you want to know?
Well, this is what I've been able to glean, and it's only like 3 players, and then I need you to fill out the rest. And I thought you could maybe do it under the guise of Simpsons characters, because I think that's always a good analogy. Okay, so I picked up that Pat Cummins is woke. Everyone just seems to think he's woke. He's good looking and he's woke. Dave Warner.
Okay, so here's what I will say about this. Like, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So certainly that is the broader perception. So the Pat Cummins story is, I'll give you the whole quick backstory because he's an important character in all that's going on here. So burst onto the scene as a 18-year-old, like a very young, right? Made an incredible debut, had this bowling action that everyone was like, is there any way he's going to be able to sustain bowling this fast with that action? It turns out the answer to that was absolutely not. Let's have a broken back for about 24 months. And so he had to go away, completely rebuild his action. But at Cricket Australia were so convinced that he was going to be the future of Australian cricket that they essentially paid him to do rehab.
Get a backiotomy.
Yeah, they were just like, they went to, they actually stole spines out of graveyards and kept inserting into them until they found one that worked. But no, they basically just said, go away, get yourself right, we'll wait and we'll pay you in the meantime to go and do that. And they were right because he took over the Australian captaincy during a time when it was incredibly difficult. There'd been a scandal from our previous captain.
Gate?
No, there'd been a subsequent scandal.
Oh, really?
So,
missed that news on that.
Because Steve Smith lost his job as captain because of Sandpaper Gate, and then Tim Payne was the captain, and he lost his for off-field reasons. Oh. So
I just started watching the test on Amazon Prime. Will they get to the off-field reasons in that?
Well, spoilers, there's a photo that gets sent to somebody of something that shouldn't have got sent to somebody. Yeah, so anyway. But the point being that Pat Cummins comes in this time. The other thing in Test match cricket is traditionally bowlers don't make great Test match captains. Too much to think about on blah, 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 blah. He comes in at a time when Australia is sponsored by a mining company. There's all these he makes some public statements about, normal, rational things hey, the science on climate change is a bit alarming. Really out there.
You say normal or rational. I hear bloody climate alarmist, pearl clutching.
Go woke, go broke. And that whenever there was a sign that the Australians weren't there was a wobble, it was always...
I imagine the Murdoch media just saw it for what it was, a team trying to gel, and they didn't pin it all unreasonably on one person's social and political beliefs.
Oh, well, then you'd be incorrect. It was the opposite of that.
What?
So it turns out it was the complete opposite of what you've said. I can't believe it. You were so off the mark. So everyone, it's all about... But the thing they hate the most, and I think there is even an undercurrent of this through some of the past players, is that he captains in a very different way. It isn't about and it's much more understanding.
Too woke, mate. Back in my day, next thing you're going to be telling me he doesn't smash beers after a win.
He doesn't. He's brought in a policy where when they're celebrating a victory, they don't have beers for their original celebration because Usman Khawaja, who plays for the Australians and is an integral part of the team, is a Muslim. You say it.
Oh, my God.
And so they've stopped.
I've had a gutful of this. A gutful. Australia's on its nose. Australian cricket's in crisis. What's next? Going to fly a bloody rainbow flag at the MCG on Boxing Day? I'm going to watch something else.
So the only thing that's really been disappointing to the people who think that Pat Cummins is too woke is the fact that Australia has done nothing but be great since he's been captain. So that's been very hard for them to really he's had to recently, the only series we did not do well in was India recently, although we did better at the end of it than the start of it. And Pat Cummins had to go back to Australia mid-series because unfortunately his mother passed away. She was very ill and then passed away. So he's not only been dealing with a personal tragedy, on top of everything else, but Pat Cummins, captain of Australia, star in this story.
Okay, Dave Warner, sledger, not too bright.
Massively sledged by everybody online where during this test match when he was on the balcony he's trying to do a crossword.
Ricky Ponting is the one who bloody started it. Asking if it was a kid's crossword.
I don't know if you know this, Charlie, but I'm not on social media anymore. But
No. You should make that the basis of your entire personality.
So sometimes social media will make it into the mainstream press. And that was a good example of there was a whole article on the memes that had been made out of David Warner trying to do the crossword, including just like ones where he'd done it as Snake, just like line through the boxes.
But he's chatty, right? Like he likes to chat. You seem like I wasn't always hearing stuff, but yeah, he's always like chatting to the batsmen and stuff. And even like, we'll get to it in the members pavilion at Lords. Like he doesn't mind having a chat with people, but seems to be in the spirit of like, like he doesn't seem like he seems to be having fun while he's doing it.
It's interesting with Warner because he's like a kid from the western suburbs. Like he's a working class kid. And I think that a lot of the attitude to Warner sometimes has that element of class about it that he just doesn't, he doesn't fit in the way that but he also was the main architect of Sandpapergate. And so, look, the backstory to Sandpapergate that people don't remember is that the South African crowds were chanting ridiculously horrible things about his wife. And they were, because Candace Warner is his wife, I'm not even adding to this because this is like a well-known story and you kind of need to know it to understand the point. But many years ago, when she was a young single athlete, she had her and Sonny Bill Williams, who was a rugby league and union player, had like a toilet encounter at a Sydney bar, and it like made. It's
my favourite indie band toilet encounter.
Yeah, you saw a toilet encounter at the Big Day Out, right?
They were pavement.
You wore your bucket hat, I remember. So they just had, as young hot athletes might do, they had a hookup at a pub one night, and it made the gossip pages. And so people know that story, essentially, is like, and so in South Africa, the thing that people never tell about Sandpapergate is that in South Africa, people were wearing Sonny Bill Williams masks to the game to taunt David Warner, right?
It is so weird.
It's weird and it's gross. He's like got two beautiful kids with this woman and like, and he is the sort of guy, and we all know this sort of guy, like loves his family, absolute, like, this is the circumstance of what happened then. So he was the architect of the cheating, but he also was the one who had a reason to cheat, if you know what I mean. Like, like I'm not saying it excuses it, but it gives it a context that, So he's come into this never having made runs in England traditionally, and he's on the arse end of his career. So there was the Australians before we did this basically said he was going to get to play in the World Test Championship, and then they'd reassess after the second test match because his was probably the position in the team going into this test match that was most shaky. They brought two backup openers because they didn't think he'd make it through. So far, he's actually done a pretty good job, like a better job than we would have expected.
And then there's Steve Smith, who, from my understanding, is the greatest of all time. That's all the commentators seem to focus on, is that he is just an incredible batsman. His average is incredible. He made 9,000 runs faster than anyone. His fielding is excellent. Like, he seems to be some kind of is he a cricket savant or something like that? Like, you see him muttering to himself and, he's just got this kind of, he strikes me as like, if I was going to make a high concept series for American TV about an idiosyncratic detective or something, I'd cast Steve Smith.
Literally what I said on one of these podcasts, because he's got all the quirks of a monk. He shouldn't go into, like cricket commentary. He should go into, solving crimes, because like to watch Steve Smith. So yes, Steve Smith picked first for Australia, batting at number 8, bowling leg spin to be the next Shane Warne. But just has an incredible hand-eye coordination and a method that is absolutely out of no textbook for cricket at all. In fact, it's
what does that mean?
Well, have you seen him bat? He doesn't look like he knows how to bat. Like he takes, he has this range of like little ticks and quirks and whatever he goes through between every ball. He moves across the stumps.
Fascinating watching him in between like balls doing all that weird stuff, little flicks and
it's compulsive.
Like talking to himself. Right.
Talking to himself. Then he moves across the stumps, plays the ball in a place where most batsmen wouldn't go to, because if you miss the ball, you're going to be absolutely plumb LBW in those circumstances. But he's just like, oh, I've got a better plan. I just won't miss the ball. I'll just so that's just for idiots who can't hit the ball all the time. And yeah, fastest player to make, I think, 32 Test centuries in the history of Test match cricket, only behind Ricky Ponting now when it comes to Test match centuries for Australia. Averages just below 60, which means puts him second to Don Bradman in the history of Test match cricket for anyone who's played a substantial amount of innings. So he is incredible. And there was a period, particularly after the sandpaper thing and then just, the COVID disruption and all that, where he was doing a lot of talking about the fact that he might not play a lot more Test match cricket. But I just think he is. But so enigmatic. Here's a few things that you may have picked up about Steve Smith or not. Doesn't really sleep during the Test matches. So loves batting so much that he gets too excited and stays up all night practicing his shots and shadow playing cricket in his room, waiting to go out and bat again.
He's the dog from Bluey, the one that practices all the time, like against the side of his house with like a cricket ball and shit like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the game now, like the second test, which, my God, like I have enough anxiety following a team that regularly lets me down. The peaks and troughs I felt in this match where I thought, oh, we've fucked it. Oh, we've got it. Oh, we've fucked it. Like it's just never ending. I went to bed last night, resigned to the fact that we'd lost it. Ben Stokes was fucking hitting sixes off every ball. I think that
Charlie, would you say Headingley all over again?
Oh, Headingley all over again, yes. What did I say? Edgbaston before.
Oh, no, it might have been Edgbaston all over again. I can't remember.
What happened in Headingley all those years ago?
Oh, no. I mean, Ben Stokes, like, famously, like, Australians are, like, shit at losing close ones on the final day of Test matches. In fact, we're very good at losing close ones on the final day. Like we're not shit at it at all. We're really, really good at it. But Stokes, like, has played some magnificent innings against us. And I was saying to all my friends when I was messaging them yesterday before it started, I said, I've got a really bad feeling about today. I just felt like Duckett. So famously, this new opener for England, Ben Duckett.
Tiny. So
he's
cute.
Tiny little man.
Tiny little man.
And he's like in the last 2,000 balls he's faced in Test cricket, he's left like 3 of them or something. He just is like, well, if you're going to bowl it, I'm going to try to hit it. I'm going to give it a go. And he was great, but Stokes was always the one that if somebody was going to play, because this is kind of what Stokes does. Like, Stokes isn't a consistent cricketer. He's not one of those guys who's your Mr. Reliable, like every match he's going to kind of reproduce the big thing. He's your big occasion, big innings, big moment player.
And is he like a dedicated all-rounder or is he more of a bowler? Or
he's an all-rounder
batsman?
who doesn't really bowl anymore because his body is buggered. So, like, he can bowl and he's actually a really great bowler when he can. But
he's a big guy, right? Like, he looks big and strong.
Big and strong. He's the captain. So, like, he took over as captain for Bazball. So, like, this is, he is
Bazball.
He is the on-field personification of Bazball. And he very much, like, leads because, I mean, you've got to have the captain have the buy-in, right? Or it doesn't work for anybody else. And so he's the one setting the ridiculous ring fields or coming up with plans that are just counterintuitive to what anyone else has done in the history of cricket. And he's the one who just, when players are throwing away their wicket trying to, like, bash it in unlikely circumstances, like, this is what we're about.
But we like Ben Stokes, don't we? Like he's one of those the analogy that kept coming to mind for me was like, if he's Megatron, then Ollie Robinson is Starscream. Even though Megatron's the leader of the bad guys, you kind of respect Megatron because he's Megatron. Yeah. But Starscream, his little offsider, fuck that guy.
Yeah, shut the fuck up, mate.
Shut the fuck up. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with that to a certain extent. He is And much like Megatron, he has a couple of skeletons in his closet.
Oh, does he?
But yeah, I think that there is, if he played for us, we would love
begrudging admiration.
Yeah, exactly. If he was on our side, we'd be wrapped. Whereas like Ollie Robinson, he's like one of those guys that, you know, we've all experienced this in sports teams where you're like, oh God, I hate that he plays for us because he is horrible. You know, I reckon if you're an English person, you just, I don't think there would be any part, because this is Ollie Robinson who, after the first test, was doing all those interviews like England had won the first test.
Yeah.
He was just like I really felt like a win, you know. Yeah, I think we're really going to roll over him in the next. I was like, did you check the result, mate? Do you actually know what happened in the game?
And so what about Stuart Broad? Because I quite liked Stuart Broad. I liked his headband. Headbands, like, is that his thing, or is that fairly commonplace these days?
So no, that's his thing. Stuart Broad used to be our
big Cobra Kai fan, I'm guessing.
He was our number one villain back in the day.
He was?
Yes.
For personality reasons, or just because he's a good player?
Oh, no, like, I mean, villain in the way that we love a villain, Stuart Broad. Like, you know, and like he was the one that used to get Warner out all the time, but he's also very confrontational, as we'll get to in this match, because it goes from being, you know, fun all in the spirit to being a whole different thing by the end of this match. And He's a very skilled player. He's a fast bowler. He's courageous. You know, he got hit in the head a couple of times and he just goes on through it. Like,
how many people have got hit in the head?
I mean, I would suggest too many, to be honest.
It was a lot, though.
Definitely.
Like, I know I've been in a coma for 25 years.
Well, it felt like a few of them might be in a coma after it if they weren't very fucking careful. So I agree with you. Too many people. Oh, okay. Well, let's just get to the fucking end of it, and we can. So
work our way back.
Let's go. Let's start with the biggest incident in the game, I guess. Let's start at the end and work our way backwards, which is Australia won. Obviously, took a 2-0 lead in the best of 5 series. Of course, Australia only need a tie in the series to retain the Ashes, because we are the holders of the Ashes at the moment. But obviously, we're looking for our first win in England for 20 years. So. Very good start, obviously. But the truth of it is that, as you said, on any day during the test match at any particular time, England could have won as well. And that's been the case, I think, for almost every day that like these test matches have been played. So with a bit of luck one way or the other. Although in this match, England definitely had the best of the conditions and still didn't quite get there in the end. But there was one incident that people are obviously going to talk about a lot, which is Alex Carey's run out, stumping, as a
stumping or run out?
Is.
Stumping,
well, originally they called it a run out, but it was changed to be correctly a stumping.
Yeah.
Of Johnny Bairstow, the English wicketkeeper, when he stepped out of his crease at the end of the over. So, Charlie, as a person who has not been watching, I've got plenty of opinions on this, so it's fine. But as a person who hasn't been watching for all this time, when you see something like that, what are your thoughts?
Okay. Well, my cold reading of it was it didn't look great. Like, to me, it seemed like the ball was dead. He was simply stepping out to seek to the other batsman. And when the decision happened, and the appeal was a bit kind of like confused as well. It wasn't like a confident appeal. It was kind of like, is that out? Not how's that, but is that? was it felt like?
Yeah.
Because everyone was kind of unsure about it. And then obviously they go to the replay. So I was confused. I texted Adam Zwar, who is my go-to at the moment for any test-related questions, and was like, is there grey area in that, or is it cut and dried? And he said, well, there is a bit of grey area. But he said the way he was trained, or the way he played cricket as a batsman, was you never leave your crease until you are certain that the ball has left the hands of the wicketkeeper. So the grey area being like, I guess it's a sportsmanship kind of thing. Like, he's clearly unaware. Do you take advantage of that? Look, my understanding is, to the letter of the law, it's completely legal and he did the right thing, and Bairstow's a big dopey idiot who shouldn't have wandered out of his crease. But I can sort of understand, if you're an English person, why you might think, oh, come on, motherfucker. Like, he clearly thought the ball was dead.
Yeah, but he was wrong.
But you saw that clip. You saw the clip where they showed him wandering out of the crease in the previous balls, and Carey didn't stump him. But I guess that's
no. But
kind
Carey
of like
did it because he was wandering out of his crease.
Yeah,
that was. I mean, I think that actually proves it. So, okay, I can understand why, of course, when a decision like this goes against you, you would understand. Like, but I think it's in exactly the same spirit as the Stark catch the night before, which is it's a letter of the law decision. So Stark clearly caught that ball the night before, but under the law, if he puts his hand down on the grass like that in the end of his action, that is not out in the definition of the law. And in this regard, Bairstow is meant to stay in his crease. If it were two actions, like if Kerry had held the ball for a second,
waited for a bit,
but it wasn't. It was literally like that's why it is a stumping, because it was in the same motion. Like if he was up by the stumps and Bairstow goes out of the crease, it is perfectly fine for Kerry to whip off the bails, and nobody would have in any way thought that was inappropriate, right?
But we definitely poked the bear, didn't we? Like the reaction.
Yeah, but let's get to whether this was a good, because I just want to just clear this up, because this is absolutely out. Is it in the spirit of the game? If you're talking about the overall spirit of cricket, probably not, right? It's not in the overall spirit of cricket. Is it in the spirit of this game where Bairstow had tried to do the same thing to the Australians in the first innings? It's literally within what the person who was victim of it, was trying to do to other people earlier in the game. So, of course, it's in the spirit of the game. And you can't say to me that when you're playing this baseball style of cricket that suddenly you're going to appeal to the ancient
someone being too
ghosts
attacking.
of you know what I mean? Like literally everyone's just been bowling bouncers at everybody's head for the last day and a half, but suddenly this is not in the spirit of the game.
None of the experts commentating thought there was anything wrong with it. It was just I think it's a question of the optics. The optics, especially in replay when everything's slowed down, it doesn't look like you could imagine that it is two actions, or that there was more consideration that went into it rather than an opportunistic.
But it wasn't.
Stumping.
Like when you see it in real time, he takes it and throws it back. But the other thing is that Bairstow. So this year in cricket, they made a big change. So you know what the man-cad is? You know this when...
No, I'm intrigued. Take me to the man. Is that near Arc?
So the man-cad was when somebody is backing up too far at the bowler's end, and you run them out at the bowler's end. Like it used to be a thing that you didn't do that. That wasn't in the spirit of cricket.
Yeah, and you do it in junior levels at school cricket.
But you normally give them a warning, right?
Yeah.
One more time and I'll do this. But they've said now that is not against the spirit of cricket. If the batsman is trying to take an advantage in any way, then it's up to them. The onus is on the batsman to be within their ground. And in this case, the onus is on the batsman to be within their ground until the umpire calls over. You can't just play a shot and then just wander forward. Particularly as a wicketkeeper, you're the one who should fucking know this. And by the way, back to my original point that I put a little pin in, Brendan McCullum, who was a wicketkeeper who did this shit all the fucking time.
So tell me then.
Yeah.
So Stuart Broad, the very next over, very demonstrably, at the end of the over, put his bat over the crease and looked around for approval.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Yeah, so you should, mate.
Is that in the spirit of cricket? Is that good sportsmanship, being a petulant little bitch?
It's not, is it? It's but this is, I don't mind this, by the way, because, if you're looking for this to be a great series, as you said, it poked the bear. Broad batted with the determination, and he did it for the rest of his innings. He checked
it was terrifying.
Every time. And then, obviously Stokes just you could tell. He was already on the way to playing one of those sort of innings, but that was absolutely something they were clearly using as a catalyst themselves to try and
Because didn't dinner, some break happened just afterwards, so they had time to talk about it. And then Stokes came out and I was doing a bit of other work and sort of had the sound off, but it was being in the playground and, the bigger kid is just smacking everything. Could not, and I guess, so short ball theory, which I didn't know what that meant for the first 2 days, but then I got okay, right. When the pitch is very green like that, you're just going to bowl short.
It's not because it's green. It's because there's not a lot of life in it and there's not a lot of movement in it. So they have to bounce it in to kind of restrict scoring, really, is what they're trying to do.
Because they're not getting any swing or anything like that, right? Or so then he starts smacking it like crazy, and I'm I don't know about this field position where it's just just put everyone on the boundaries. But if you're still hitting sixes, it doesn't fucking matter how far you put it out.
No, that was certainly his theory. He was you know what? You can ring all other 10 players around the boundary. I'm just going to hit it over all their heads.
But so tell me then, knowing Ben Stokes or having watched Ben Stokes play, was he particularly angry? Do you think the stumping was part of it, or is that just the way he plays?
Both.
Right.
But I think, absolutely I would say that the Australians would have, in the situation when you're looking for something to crystallise your innings, something to hang it around, of course you would take advantage of that moment. And in this series, when you're 2-0 down now, of course you are going to lean into the idea that you are somehow, cheated out of it or wronged or whatever to try to, get your squad to play for something more than what you're playing for at the moment. But this is literally a team that their whole ethos is that cricket is meant to be entertaining. And clearly what happened made the game more entertaining.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I was getting very anxious. I didn't like what I was seeing because I was like, when Stokes came in, I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. We're in a pretty strong position. And then after the stumping and he goes crazy and they get it below 100, I'm like, well, how the fuck? He just made 24 runs off that last over. It's only going to take 5 overs for them to win the game. And that's when I got anxious and I turned it off. Well, it was also about 1 a.m. by that point as well. It's getting late and I've got a child I've got to look after. But did you feel like Australia was rattled? That Smith drops that catch?
Australia were rattled, no doubt.
Yeah. Stark drops that catch. We dropped 2 catches and the fielding goes to shit. Everything was falling apart. But then they kept persisting with the short ball. Was it not time to just bowl a Yorker or something?
I guess they just had a plan. This is
wear them down.
One of the things about this team, because this is a new tactic. This isn't something we've seen the Australians do at all. It is obviously
the short ball is a new tactic.
Yeah,
really?
To bowl the short ball in the way they were bowling the short ball is very unusual but we don't play on a lot of. So essentially, what the English have done for these first 2 tests is they think that their strength is their batting and being able to bash it everywhere, and so they've prepared 2 very batsman-friendly pitches has not been particularly friendly to Jimmy Anderson, who is their 40-year-old bowler who's like, I'm fucking retiring. You guys are fucking my life. I'm one of the greatest athletes of all time. I'm about to be the 2nd highest wicket taker in the history of Test match cricket, but I am old and I am not putting up with this shit.
So the groundskeeper, they're on the side of the home team, are they? So you can actually you can game the system to advantage your team. That's part of Test cricket?
Yes.
Is it? Oh.
Yes.
Oh, no, so it's an unspoken.
I mean, you're not meant to cheat, but everyone does. They prepared pitches that are more conducive to the best style of cricket. So when you go to England, they're gonna traditionally they would prepare swinging pitches because their advantage was, that Australians couldn't play the swinging ball. But because they think they've got this advantage with this attacking style of batting, they've prepared much flatter decks because the Australian strength is our fast bowlers, clearly, particularly with Lyon out now, and we should talk about that. So India are famous for it. So you go to India and, the Australians are playing 3 spinners, which is not our ideal scenario, but the Indian pitches are just prepared to be played for spin. So spin in Australia is going to be very interesting because Nathan Lyon was playing his, as you said, Bold Shane was the soundtrack of stump mics of your generation, but for the last 100 Test matches in a row for Australia, it has been Bold Gary because Nathan Lyon he played 100 Test matches in a row, which was the first time a bowler in the history of Test match cricket had ever played 100 Test matches in a row. And then he fucked his calf and he's out for the rest of the series. So, yeah,
looked bad too. I mean, how old is he?
He's okay. He'll be back. For an off-spin bowler, this is not the end of him in any way. It's not that. But Todd Murphy, if he plays, he's only 22 and he's sort of the next gun to come along. He's definitely the guy that'll take over from Lyon when Lyon does decide to go. But
so on the pitch, if it's a pitch that you're getting no movement, does that is that for spin as well, or is it just on fast bowlers can't get any movement going? I mean, obviously there's a
if it gets, it would have been interesting to see Lyon bowl on that pitch on the final day. That's his job. That's why you have a spinner in your team. And normally on those flat decks, that's what happens. But England don't have a quality spinner either. So England had Jack Leach, their number one spinner. He was out before the series, and so they got Moeen Ali, who retired 2 years ago. They literally went to a guy who was retired.
Wake up.
He was still playing, 2020 cricket, and they were like, you know what? He's bowling 2 overs every 3 days. He should be fine to bowl 30 overs in a row in a test match. But it turns out he wasn't, Charlie. His fingers broke off. And so he couldn't play. And so Joe Root, who is actually their best batsman, is now also, I guess, their spinner. And Australia had a specialist spinner. So they weren't really trying to prepare wickets that would be really conducive to spin either, because that would give Australia an advantage.
And so the other thing I noticed was the idiosyncrasies of the batsmen, like in between a delivery, like whether or not they practice a shot or they tug at their shirts or they do a little head wobble, or like Steve Smith does all of it. Is it beneficial? Like, is it hardwired just from years of playing the game? And, I remember probably as a batsman, as a junior, probably doing the same thing, but I'm just aping what I'd see AB doing. But is there much to be gained from, you've just blocked a shot to then do it a couple of times, then go for a bit of a walk and tug your shirt? Like, are there any batsmen who just in between balls just stand there? They don't feel the need to do anything, to jig about and swing their bats and move their legs, all that kind of stuff.
I mean, honestly, Usman Khawaja comes pretty close of the modern day players. So, he's like, I'm 36. I'm not here for all this fuss. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm just going to lean on my bat.
He does. He does a lot. That real casual, like cross your legs, just a little kind of like have your back cocked under so it's taking slightly some of your weight. Like Uzi will do that, whereas Steve Smith has this incredible like routine that he has to do every time. But my understanding is it's all about, clearly, if you want to bat for a long time, you can't be focused at all parts of that time. So you need to have some method by which you turn off and turn on your focus. And so these players do it through these various means to sort of turn off and turn off your. And I guess the fact that Steve Smith, who has the most ticks and is also the second best credentialed cricketer in the history of Test match cricket, I guess he would suggest that the proof was in the pudding.
It does work, yeah. All that short balls, though, did make me think of, I used to hate facing like a real fast bowler, especially if they're bowling short. And there's a couple of times I saw like players ducking under balls. I'm like, that's barely a bouncer. And I remember one game as a cricketer playing where someone bowled short to me and I ducked and it hit the stumps. Like it was that low. I was that scared of it. I must have been almost like flat on my belly. It went over me and just hit the stumps.
All right. Well, we should get close to finishing up, but I want to run through just some other things that happened in this test match. And did you see, speaking of Bairstow, their keeper, did you see the Just Stop Oil protests at the start of this test match?
Yeah. Yes, I did, with the flares.
Yeah.
So and just carried him off like a mannequin.
He literally grabbed
my
one,
window,
put him under his arm like he was like a 4-year-old toddler having a meltdown over chocolate at a supermarket checkout, and just carried them.
Just carried him. It was amazing.
All right. So I thought that it was very interesting that Travis Head bowled when Nathan Lyon went out, and Travis Head is one of those guys. I don't know. What was your vibe on Travis Head?
I just was going off what the commentators were saying, which is, look, he's an above serviceable bowler.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that, so he's a great batsman. Like, he's our most attacking batsman, had an incredible last couple of years, proper old school cricketer in his look and his kind of vibe,
You're right.
Like Alex Carey, of course, the Australian wicketkeeper, he also captained the first GWS team in the AFL. Like, he looks like a sports person. Whereas, Travis Head looks like a cricketer. He 100% looks like a cricketer. Like someone.
He's so glad mustaches came back in fashion. He's like, finally.
He said, I looked like this when I was born. I'm just glad that the world caught up with me again. But also in that classic style of those sort of people who can just kind of do anything. He's actually quite a serviceable bowler for a guy who isn't a bowler and has quite a good test match record of being brought on and getting wickets. So that was pretty fun. What's your take on Marnus Labuschagne? Do you know much about Marnus Labuschagne?
He's an interesting. That's an Adams Wire. I had to pass it off to Adams Wire because there was a lot of talk about him being like the heir apparent as like one of the best test batsmen in the world. But I couldn't get a vibe on his personality. There's quite a few Australian players that I'm like, what's your, like, it's easy, with Dave Warner, you sort of get there, with Smith, you get there, with Pat Cummins, it's all quite, the archetypes there. But with him, I'm like, what is he? Is he like a professional athlete? Is he another savant like Steve Smith? Is he like a sledger? I couldn't box him. Tell me, who is he?
Yeah, okay. So he is definitely got a bit of like Steve Smith savant about him. Like probably almost too much. He's actually number one credentialed test match batsman in the world at the moment, but hasn't been able to kind of make 100 recently, which is a little bit worrying. But he is a absolute cricket nut. Like loves cricket. Like from South Africa originally, the Labuschagnes, Marnus. And
sounds like she'd be from New Orleans with Labuschagne. Marshali. Take you down to old easier. Labuschagne.
He loves a chat when he's out there on the ground, and he is someone that you absolutely should ban in the same way as Homer Simpson, if you want a Simpsons reference, wasn't allowed into the No Homers Club because they already had a Homer. When they are forming the Iddy, Biddy, Diddy, Hitty committee, the one guy you do not want to invite is Marnus Labuschagne, who thinks that every time he did Hitty. He is the biggest. Convinced. You'd love him on your side in a trial because he's always convinced. But so we got Usman Khawaja, had a huge period out of the Australian Test team, has come back.
Challenges in England, from my understanding.
And has made more runs in England so far in 2 tests than the Australian openers made in the entire series last time we were in England. He's had an incredible last couple of years, came back to the Australian Test team unexpectedly to open. He actually has the best record of anyone who's opened, who's played that much cricket as an opener. He's had an incredible time, but he's come back with a very nonplussed, nonchalant, I can't be bothered by any of this, very much old dog attitude to like
unfussed.
Like, I mean, the way that he plays baseball is mostly just with indifference.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the time he just kind of leaves it and goes, have another go. Go back there and try that again. That looks like a lot of effort for me to just leave it and then lean on my bat. Dave Warner fighting for his life. Marnus Labuschagne, number 1 rated test batsman in the world, chirpy, but he's made a couple of decent innings so far, but hasn't had that big one yet. Steve Smith, one of the greatest of all time, loves batting in England, made 100 in the World Test Championship, made 100 in this test, probably another couple of hundreds to go before the end of the Ashes.
Sees the world in a collection of geometric patterns is my guess, Steve Smith.
I mean, I think that is true. Like,
he's just constantly judging angles and inclines and trajectories.
Steve Smith, there's people that are one of the most admired athletes in my entire lifetime, and someone I would have nightmares about being stuck in a conversation with. Travis Head, who I'd love to have a chat with, brilliant attacking batsman, only has one way of playing regardless of the situation. Cameron Green, what's your...
Don't know much.
What do you know about Cameron Green? He's our all-rounder, Cameron Green.
I don't know anything about him. Dropped a catch, I believe.
Yeah, but one of the best catches like going around in world cricket, particularly for a giant man who looks like a baby. He's a giant.
Does look like a giant baby.
Giant baby man, but he's an incredible cricketer. Hasn't really had his moment yet so far in England, but future of Australian cricket. Lovely personality, popular teammate of everybody, quite quiet and shy. That sort of big, young doofusy, been involved in a couple of controversial catches because he's such a good catch. Alex Carey, former GWS footballer turned cricketer for Australia, played pretty well so far over there. Good personality.
They're having a good series.
Best mates with Travis Head. They're the two who South Australian connection. Then you have Mitchell Starc, didn't play in the first Test match. Scott Boland played. Mitchell Starc married to Alyssa Healy, the captain of the Australian Women's Ashes team. So that's our cricket celebrity couple, Mitch Starc and Alyssa Healy. Yeah.
Their kids, if their kids aren't cricketers, what the hell is going on?
They'll probably be artists, poets, philosophers or something. Pat Cummins, Captain Pat, who could not bat for the last 2 years, just had forgotten how to bat and then has come to England and just remembered, played some incredibly...
He's very good looking too. Does that get spoken often? Like he's very handsome.
It's just everything about him. He speaks really well. He's...
Oh, does he?
Oh,
thoughtful.
Mate, he's... Yeah, I know. He's super good looking. He speaks really well, but he's fucking woke, mate, and he's ruining Australian cricket as far as I'm concerned. He's an impeccable role model. He's literally never done anything that you should be ashamed of, but he's a bit fucking woke. He believes that climate change is real. So, Nathan Lyon was he was the guy who leads underneath the Southern Cross we stand. Are you familiar with this, the Australian celebration? So It's the equivalent of a team song. Okay. So at the end of the matches, the Australians will gather and they do this chant called "Underneath the Southern Cross I Stand." There's an extra verse to it now that I don't know, but I know the first verse is "Underneath the Southern Cross I stand, a sprig of wattle in my hand. A native of my native land, Australia, you fucking beauty," I believe was the... Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like poetry, but it makes no fucking sense. But now there's
it also sounds like something white nationalists might also chant at the start of a meeting as well.
Yeah.
Especially under a Southern Cross.
Underneath my Southern Cross tattoo, I say fuck you and you and you.
I say I grew here, you flew here.
Nathan Lyon, I think spiritual leader, that kind of like quirkier character, cool player. Josh Hazelwood, bit sort of straight up and down old school fast bowler, champion bowler. Scott Boland, people's hero, underdog who, hadn't played, until his 30s and then, sprung onto the scene. That's kind of the personalities of our team.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to ask you that, but that's good. That gives me some good background info to go into the third test. Because I know we have to go. Just one last thing. So the members in Lords.
Let's talk about that because I think that's important.
The reaction.
So the fact that, firstly, for people who didn't watch, it's weird that you didn't watch and you're listening to this, but maybe you are. Thank you.
Maybe. Maybe you just woke up from a coma like me. It's like, what's podcasting?
You know what one of my favorite moments of the stump mic stuff was, I just remembered, so you hear some of the banter, of course, and of course it got more heated on the final day. But one of my favorite moments of the banter was, I think it might have been to Usman Khawaja, when Johnny Bairstow said to him, he goes, "You'll be the next one on Strictly Australia." Did you see that? So Strictly Come Dancing is like what we call in Australia Dancing with the Stars. And it was the best exchange because like Bairstow thought he had a real zinger about like the way that Usman was dancing. And this Usman was like, I don't get that. What's your reference? Like Strictly Australia? I don't understand. I don't get it, man. So that was fun. So you have to walk through.
We're going to spread you like Marmite. What is that? We don't have Marmite in Australia.
So anyway, so you have to walk. It's quite spectacular. So you have to actually walk through the long room at Lords to go down to bat and walk back and forward. It's actually it's so long a walk from the dressing room to the field that when Nathan Lyon went out to bat while injured, he had to go and stand right at the front there because if he had to go the whole way, he would have got timed out by the time he got down there. And so he had to actually just go and stand and wait. But that's charming, right? And it would be great if it could be preserved. But the way that those fucking Muppets reacted when the Australians went back through there was a fucking disgrace. Like the idea that these old fucking privileged white colonizers in any way could sit around in their fucking palace of privilege, like not knowing anything about fucking cricket or the spirit of cricket, where you have the opportunity to rub shoulders with some of the greatest athletes of all time, and then you behave like the absolutely peanuts that you are, then go fuck yourself. Suck shit, England.
I think that's a great note to go out on. I've got nothing to add. I concur. Aussie, Aussie,
Aussie. Charlie Clausen, thank you so much for being my guest on Two Guys, One Earn after the second test match of the Ashes, won by the Australians. Good victory. Steve Smith, great innings by Steve Smith. Travis Head, like pretty good in general. All the Australians contributed in some way. And
were you shocked that we won, or did you watch the whole thing? Like I was shocked. I thought for sure we're heading for a loss.
Oh man, I don't know. Like I went into that day convinced we were going to lose, but there's something about this Australian cricket team that just they don't lose a lot. And the two final days, and this is great, like about this series, is both of the two final days, it could have gone either way. On the final day in the first test, England could have won that. On the final day of this, England could have won as well. So the fact that Australia is 2-0 up isn't, I don't think, a completely accurate representation of where these matches have been. However, I would also say this. If you're looking at the team that I think has played the best across all that time, I think it's Australia. This test match in particular, I was like, Australia are playing the best here. But because of the way that England play, and this is what's so great about baseball, is it just feels like, as you said, it's 100 runs. 100 runs normally feels like a lot. But the way that they play, you're like, that could just be 4 good overs if they get going. And I love that. Like, I think the contest between these teams, these ideologies, I would love. So the next test starts in 3 days, right? So that's part of the quirk of it as well, which is, so all this like anger and momentum and emotion and people calling each other cheats and the crowd booing and all those sort of things, it's not going to have time to dissipate before the start of the next test match. All that's going to roll straight into this third test. So yeah, I'm super excited.
Okay.
Thank you, Charlie.
How do you sign off normally?
I mean,
bye.
I don't know. I normally just say thank you.
You're welcome. And that's the end of that. Is that your new tagline?
Listener.